Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here amongst the artists and for such a great event, historic event. I'm going to just share with you some of my photographs. It's very difficult for me to talk about my work and the meaning of my work. It began as an outlet or a replacement for verbal communication, and I use photography as a means to interpret moments. This is the image that is displayed. It's titled, "I Look Just Like My Daddy." It was shot on a rooftop in Williamsburg in 2004 of a subject. She goes by the name Macaulay. Photography is something which at its very best is immediate, seemingly unpredictable, and inspiring. I respect and admire photographers who are more controlled in their picture taking. This, though, is contradictory to my process. Can you hear it in my voice? Yikes. I've been investigating female experience that reflects my own. I sort of look at the process of picture making as a form of psychoanalysis or a string of Freudian slips. I have to relinquish control and just respond. And in that process, if lucky, I discover these fundamental and insignificant moments which initially seem arbitrary and inconsequential. This is an image taken from a story that was published in a fashion magazine. I approached the editor with the goal of, I guess, publishing a story, and the means for that to happen is I pitched it as a fashion story. So I was able to cast these band of characters and kind of use a mainstream commercial medium to get my images out there. This is Isabel. Unlike most of the subjects that I photographed, she actually approached me and requested that I photograph her, and she sent me pictures of herself, and I was very inspired by her, so it was a wonderful experience. These next two pictures were shot at a 4th of July party. Kate Hardy is an artist. She's the woman on the right. She has this annual mud wrestling party. And it's on 4th of July because she believes it's a dirty holiday. This next picture, titled Twins, is part of a different series titled, it's the Immaculate series. And I sought out female-headed families, and then it actually broadened to just single-sex headed families. This is my favorite picture of the series because it really addresses the ideal of acceptable public behavior for women and what's deemed appropriate for public space versus private space, and what's considered appropriate. Through this experience of photographing these families, I was really discovering how creative the process it is for these families, and how there's such a lack of a family model for these individuals or these families. So it really became quite apparent to me how narrow our definition of family is. Interesting, this family, which is, they used the brother-in-law's sperm which initially would seem quite complicated. But this family was so incredible and inspiring. I had such a great time with them. And the uncle slash biological father lived on the block over. So they were just really close, and he had his biological children, or his actual children, and they visited while I was there, and it just was quite amazing. And the son that's being held up in the back, he was very verbal on how, to him, it wasn't confusing at all. So this finally is a series called JD's Lesbian Utopia, and it started in New York, and we traveled from New York to Los Angeles through the South, visiting gay and lesbian RV camps. I was invited to accompany JD, and we invited a few friends. JD's the woman in the red shirt, and she began as the hero of this project. And it evolved into somewhat JD. Her role in the project, it kind of evaporated. So she really just became a symbol of freedom and self-definition, and with we were able to, there's such a difference between just the other parts of the country that I've experienced. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and I moved to New York, so it's quite extreme. And there were the five of us kind of penetrating these environments, and it was really obvious to us the impact that we were making in these environments and how we were being perceived. In this particular project, the RV contained our world, and this world was defined by us. And it was interesting because although it was just us, it was still not free of the sexual and gender politics that exist in the mainstream world. That's it. On my way here, my girlfriend, she showed me the New York Times article. I don't know if any of you have read it yet, but it's pretty funny, because this morning I was listening to NPR, and there was a segment on Judy Chicago and how her work was received 30 years ago. And the New York Times wrote a piece on how it was obscene and it was not art. And then it was detailed too, I'm being brief. And then 30 years ago, which takes us today, there's a new New York Times article referring to this body of work as non-art. And that feminism is, although a movement, it is not it's not a body, it's not an art movement. And they referred to Judy Chicago this time as the only jewel in the crown. And it's just reaffirming how 30 years later the backlash is just as strong, and it's rooted in just as much judgment and subjugation. So I think that's all I have to say, if there's any questions. Yeah, great.
Is that all right?
Yes.
So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll sort of indicate that.
Yes.
So could you tell
Both. Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's amazing when we first started discussing this project and what it was going to look like. JD was like, we're going to go to gay and lesbian RV camps. And the rest of us were like, really? There are some? And there are so many. And they're all over the country. And internationally, there are so many. So, I mean, our RV was a self-contained lesbian traveling kind of utopia or community. And then we would infiltrate these communities. And there was such, through this experience, we learned that socially there's such a huge difference between the gay RV camps and the lesbian RV camps, and the segregation that exists that was so profound, and it really quite mimicked the segregation that exists on a larger form and the prejudice that exists. So unfortunately, it was quite illuminating to find out that we possess all of the judgment and fear that exists on a larger scale. So
did it go both ways?
no, we started in New York, and we
I mean, like, were the lesbians
yeah.
not friendly towards?
It's not that they weren't friendly. I think that people in all communities and all races really are protective of their space, and we really want to create a sacred space so we have the liberties and freedoms to express ourselves and not feel the gaze of another culture or race or sexual identity. So I think that's the core of it. It's our own fear of being, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for myself when I'm in a space that is designated just for women, it has such a different charge than a co-ed space, and it really enables me to express myself more freely.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you were saying that the RV camps that were for men, gay men, kind of were segregated from the gay women. And
It's
there was
true.
animosity there.
It's true. I don't know. I mean, animosity, I'm sure, in some respect, but I know that there are. When we got to a gay male campground, we were brought in and we were told, like, this is really a male campground, and they're tolerating us being there, and we're welcome to be there, but a lot of people have issues about mixing. And so I went to a single-sex college, and I understand where that comes from. I have that appreciation for a space being designated for women or a space being designated for men, and unfortunately, you want to believe that all gay people are united, but there's a fundamental difference on how we spend our extracurricular time.
Cass, we can take one more question.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Anyone have a burning question?
No more questions.
I do.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, just heard that term before. Is that like an anagram or something?
I think it's recreational vehicles. Yeah.
But that's what I think.
It's this is the inside of the RV. That's the back end. It's like a 33-foot massive gas guzzling. Oh yeah. I mean, it's embarrassing how much gas we went through. And yes, Mom, do you have a question?
Hey, I was going to say how proud of you.
Oh, thank you. That's not a question with me. Thanks so much.